And I'm Donna Britt.
If ever there was a museum of what went on in the last 4 decades in Baton Rouge, could you find a better tour guide than Donna Britt? She was as well known as family and just as familiar in any home. South Louisiana adopted its darling Donna Britt, a true treasure that thankfully found us. She was always there as sometimes the storms of life rolled in.
Good evening. It's taken all day to even begin to recover from what nature did in just a split second. No evidence of a huge chemical release, and so neighbors around the plant have been very concerned about whether they can open their windows.
You felt like she always had your back.
The time is now safe.
In the late 1970s at LSU, Donna was well on her way to an almost certain career in music. But it turns out a simple trip to St. Francisville changed that. You see, WFB legend Carlton Cremines was on his way to his camp there in St. Francisville when he heard a Donna James on his radio. He says he figured that smooth voice would be a great fit on his television station. And at WAFB, Donna's new music became the accompaniment of our area's triumphs and times.
I'm Donna Britt. Well, our top story breaking at this hour.
The big and the small, the good and what could be better. Either way, you trusted what she told you. And she wasn't alone.
This is Newsline 9 at 10 with George Sells. Donna Britt.
When you were a little kid, you probably thought they were married. Not quite, but just about as close to a perfect partnership as you could get. The legendary team of Donna Britt and George Sells.
And you know, who could have a better partner? We have no common interests, none.
Well, opposites attract, right?
Thanks for watching WAFB.
In her almost 4 decades on the news, Donna seemed like a real-life friend on the other side of the screen. And that's because she was, delivering the news through the years in her own style.
I wasn't going to tell this, but I couldn't go to the game tonight, so I drove by Alex Box Stadium with my windows down, hoping to hear a ball crack against the bat.
Yes, Baton Rouge's sister city is a beautiful one.
And finally, not far from here, just a short drive, is a major port city known for its raucous nightlife with a population about the size of New Orleans. In Aix-en-Provence, France, I'm Donna Britt with photographer James DeGraw, WAFB News.
The main reason Donna felt like a friend was you could hug her neck as she walked alongside of you and cheered you on.
Santa came to say.
You could feel her rattle your eardrums with a bell. You could call her and she would be there, everywhere.
My husband and I would go walking around the lakes, and it was something we did every day. But we couldn't understand why I started stumbling during all of this.
Donna first had a minor surgery to remove a bunion on her right foot, but not long after, she suddenly started losing feeling in her other leg. This is footage of Donna anchoring when things got worse. What the viewers didn't know, behind the desk, Donna says her left leg started to feel like jello. Soon, her balance was off, way off. But because you are family, Donna clued you in.
Well, hi. 3 days of testing in Houston, Texas. 6 doctors, 12 tests, shows that I have ALS.
And like family, you got to follow her every step of the way, even as those steps got harder and harder to take, eventually down an uncertain and unwelcomed road.
The speech pathologist says I have changed the culture of my personality. She said she was watching me work the hall. In other words, talk to everyone you saw. She said, you're going to have to stop talking as much if you want to preserve your voice. She said, I've never had an anchor woman for a patient.
Our world of television news flickered when Donna revealed her diagnosis. But so many of you stayed tuned in to her ups and downs, your words and encouragement now holding her up as her legs and hands and eventually her lungs and all the things that help us move started to fail.
Thanks, WAFB, for a wonderful, challenging, stimulating career. Thank you for also being my friends. I also want to thank you, the viewer. So many of you made me a member of your family. I love that.
In her last days, and without the hectic schedule of TV news, Donna got to spend more time with her kids and see Louie and Annie become the great people she'd hoped they'd be. And she got something as simple as quiet evenings at home with her husband Mark. In the end, and in her own words, Donna did not want to be seen as someone dying of ALS, but instead as someone living with ALS. In the final days, Donna nearly lost her ability to communicate. But ALS, as evil as it may be, couldn't silence Donna Britt. A great communicator will always find a way, and Donna did up until the very end.
I have stood on the shoulders of giants.
Donna Britt was always our guide and our friend, that unexpected bright spot in dark times. That super smart, terrifically talented, and goofy next-door neighbor who made your kids laugh and made you glad you moved in. Donna Britt, truly as well known as family and just as familiar in any home.